What's up, y'all? Oh my god. I swear to you, every time I'm sitting here, I'm fine, I'm not sleepy, I'm not doing anything. I hit record and I have to yawn and start coughing. Today I want to talk about a subject, but with the caveat that this might be a shorter episode because it's what I want to talk. I want to talk about. Excuse me. The worth of men. That is, where do men? Well, I mean, that's the question itself is part of the discussion, I guess. On the one hand, the worth of men could be where do men derive their self worth, but it could also be what is it that causes people to value a man, right? Mashallah. And it's a subject I've thought about, and there's not really a clear answer. I mean, there's a default answer that a lot of people who are conscious will talk about, but it's something that is deeper than that, right? And so I guess we can talk about the worth of a man in the sense of people valuing him. Like what? So there's this notion that I've heard a lot that women, girls, females are born with value and men have to earn their value. Right? And it makes sense in some regards, but I'm not quite sure how or why it makes sense. Because when I think about that quote, girls are born with value and men have to earn it, I'm reminded of the fact that the Arabs in the time of Jahiliyyah, many of the men would bury alive their female babies, right? Because they didn't want to have female children. And first of all, I'm not like a scholar on, classical Arab thought. So there may be other reasons for why they did this. And I mean, it goes without saying, this is obviously haram. Like, this is an abhorrent thing to do. But I was thinking about, like, why, what is that? And if you think about it in a practical sense, it's like females have value. And it's kind of in a weird way. So they have value, which means when they are born, they have to be protected because other men will want them. So they have that value. And so I was kind of thinking maybe for some of those men who murdered their female offspring, they did so because they had a lot of value, which means that they have to now protect them. And that sort of means two things. One, they just had a baby girl, so they've added kind of, to their wealth, so to speak, but they've not gained any new protections. Whereas if they have a boy, then their wealth, as it were, hasn't changed, but now they have new, they have a boy who's going to grow up and be able to protect and provide, right? Because it doesn't make sense to me that they would kill these children because they have no value. Because if they had no value, then there would be no. It wouldn't. You know, if you had a daughter and she grew up and she was taken advantage of, it wouldn't be considered dishonorable if she was taken advantage of, if she didn't have some kind of value, right? With the idea being that, well, she has value and she was taken advantage of, and it's dishonorable that she was taken advantage of because you, as the father, were unable to protect her, right? Because, for whatever reason, because you didn't have any sons, right? Or you didn't, your tribe or whatever wasn't, powerful enough to cover for the fact that you didn't have any sons, right? Or, what have you. So that's basically what comes to mind when I think about that. Girls are born with value, but men have to earn their value, right? And even in that situation that I just described, the men are desired, as offspring because of what they can do, because they have the potential of being valuable, of increasing, the wealth of the family, of helping to protect the family, etc. Right? So they're desired because they have the potential to bring value, but they don't have intrinsic value, so to speak. People aren't going to, as far as I know, raid your, village to take your boys, right? They're going to raid the village to take the girls and the wealth, right? Because wealth has obvious value, and females, the girls, have value. But the one kind of aspect to that kind of analysis that I still have to think about is, well, what is the value that girls have? And it's easy to talk about, oh, they can be mothers and, they are integral to reproduction and, all of this stuff, but none of that seems to really fit. And it's just something I need to think about. But anyways, so that's one side of worth, of value, where men get their value. Well, other people value them because they have the ability to, be useful, right? They have the ability to protect. They have the ability to earn. They have the ability to build. They have the ability to lead. But it's something they have to earn. And I'm talking about in society. I'm not talking about just kind of as a caveat. This isn't the Islamic perspective. I'm talking about this is how society seems to always treat men and women. And I'm kind of looking at it and thinking about, well, why is that? Why is that, right? But the other side of the kind of understanding someone might have about, the value of a man or the worth of a man is self-worth. What does a man need to value himself? MashaAllah. Well, we can look. Excuse me. We can look at, well, what do most men do? Like, what's their draw? Like, what's, what do they do? What are their actions? For most men, 99.999%, everything they do because they want a woman. They do it for a woman. Because men have this wonderful thing. I'm saying that with sarcasm. They have this wonderful thing called a sex drive that makes them really want to get it, right? And so everything that they do, in general, they do to try to get a woman. Or more, right? This is Islam. So men who are able to do that and to get a woman and, by extension, start a family, have kids, and so on and so forth, they get their value out of striving to fulfill that need. Right? So they wanted to get some, they got some, now they got kids. And the parental thing kicks in. Now the parental thing I don't understand, or I have an understanding, but I'm not a parent, right? So I can't really speak on the change that occurs. I just know that a change occurs generally when most men have children. But anyways, the children become his worth. His worth is based on his ability to provide for his children. That's how a lot of men derive their own worth when they become fathers, right? Because they had the first goal was to get the woman. They accomplished that. They got her. And so what is his worth now? Well, when he gets her, generally speaking, he's going to have kids. Well, now the goal changes. Now the goal is to raise those kids and, have success in that, right? So his worth, what determines his worth to himself, changes, right? Because even the guy who's just trying to get a woman, his inability to get a woman is something that acts as a proof to himself that he is unable to get a woman. That he's unable to get a woman, and so he is, not man enough. Like, he's not valuable. He's not, his efforts have not, they haven't been worth it. They haven't had worth. So he, by extension, has no worth in his mind. And so that's kind of just, an easy, that's kind of the basic, answer, right? But I think there's more to it. Because we also have the, in Islam, there are certain, goals that are higher status than others, right? A man who is trying to find a woman so that he can fulfill the sunnah of marrying has a certain status. The man who is trying to find a woman so that he can fulfill the sunnah of marrying and also of having kids and then doing right by those kids so that they benefit his hereafter, he has a different status. But the man who doesn't marry and rather he spends all his time studying the religion and then he dedicates himself to teaching it, he has what most would say in Islam the highest status, right, that one can obtain, right? Prophets obviously have the highest status, but you do not attain prophethood. It is something which Allah grants to whomever He willed, but it is not something you work to attain. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about, as I mentioned in, I want to say episode 3 or 4 about knowledge, maybe it was episode 2, that the highest, rank, or the highest aspiration that a man can have is to become a mujtahid and also to become a wali. But, becoming a mujtahid is a path to becoming a wali, right? And again, a mujtahid is somebody who has mastered all of the required Islamic knowledges such that he has reached the point where he is obligated to deduce the Sharia himself, right? He's not allowed to follow anybody else. So he's fulfilled all of his personal obligations and all of the communal obligations, the fard al-ain and the fard al-kifaya. I might have said that wrong. I think it's kifaya. It's been a long time since I said that word. Anyways. And so we have to think, well, why? Why is this aspiration, this seeking the knowledge to teach it and become a master of it, like, why is that, why is that the highest aspiration, the most noble path a man can take, or woman? Well, a woman can be a mujtahid, but I don't know what is actually considered the best thing for a woman to do, so I won't speak on that. But nonetheless, for a man, it is the highest it is the highest goal he can have. Why is that? Well, the easy answer is because the religion says so. Or you could say because Allah has ordered, or Allah has promised high status and reward to those who do that. But that fact doesn't necessarily convince a man that doesn't necessarily put a man on that track, and it doesn't necessarily convince him that his self-worth, that his worth is improved by going down that path. Like a person who's knowledgeable will accept that is how it is, right? They will say, yes, if I do this, then that is the best path, and that is what my goal in life is to spread the knowledge of Islam. Cool. But that doesn't instill in his heart the conviction in himself. That doesn't give him, by necessity, the conviction that a man can have in himself, right? And so the question is, well, where does that conviction come from? And this is the part where, for me personally, I've been stumped. It's something I would say I've even struggled with. Now, I got a lot of issues and stuff on top of that. So it's, my situation is more complex. But it is, but because this is something I've pondered about, like, it's something I've dedicated a lot of time to thinking about. And at this point, as anticlimactic as it is, I can't really say what it is that, one, gives a man the conviction that he's able to go down that path, but two, give him the conviction that, give him the what's a good word? I don't want to say the emotion in his heart, but like that sense of self-worth in his heart. It doesn't give him that necessarily. He can have it in his mind, like he can know, things are one way or another, but the status of his heart can be something else. I mean, just to give an example of that, the Prophet alayhi salam knows he will not be tortured in the hereafter. He know, there's not a shred of doubt. He knows. Period. All of the prophets know. But all of the prophets still fear. They fear Allah, and they have. So they're the you know. I'm not gonna say that I know how the heart or mind of a prophet works, but what is apparent is that they have the knowledge to know that they're in a good state, and yet they're still fearing, right? So there's, the mind and the heart can have two different states, if you will, right? And there are other kind of situations that are similar to that, where, a person can know that they're the most knowledgeable person in the room, but they can also have the most fear out of anybody in that room that they haven't done enough, right? Like, it's not hard to know that, in general, you have a lot of knowledge. But, yet, still, the people who are the most sincere, in fact, will still feel like they're falling short. And that they are, they're dust collecting on some shelf that nobody uses anymore, right? Like, that's where they're at. In their heart, right? So a man can know that by being on this path of striving in the way of Allah to become like a scholar, right? A scholar and a wali. Like, that's he can know that being on this path is and striving to do it, whether he's successful or not, is what gives him worth, right? A man who genuinely is trying to be, a mujtahid, and he's using wisdom and implementing the proper tactics, and techniques to reach that, and he's putting in the effort, like, this is very good. So even if he doesn't achieve it, like, he's still, like, that's, and, he's avoiding the sins, obviously. That's his situation in the hereafter will be amazing. But knowing that doesn't necessarily put the conviction in his heart, or the self-worth in his heart, such that he feels like this is it, right? And then now we have to ask the question, well, why does that matter? I can know I'm doing the right thing, but I don't feel how I think I should feel, or, I don't feel that confidence in my heart. Why does that matter? Well, if you don't feel that confidence in your heart, one, I would say that I think your efforts will not be as strong. Like, you will not be doing things at 100%. You will probably likely not even realize that you're not doing things at 100%. Like, you won't even be aware. This is because self-confidence, it unlocks more potential in you that you didn't know you have. Right? That's my belief. And oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought. Ma sha Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha lam yakun. Yeah, mashallah, there it is. It's been 24 minutes. So anyways, just to quickly summarize, oh man, I lost my train of thought. I got a text message. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, a man who is his confident in himself, right? He's going to have, I believe, less anxiety and less stress. So not only will he be at 100%, but the reduction in his stress and anxiety will be better for, his actual physical health, but also his mental health. And to kind of tie it all back into, everything, the man who is deriving his value, his worth, in his ability to find a woman, the man who is deriving his value or his worth in his ability to raise his children, and the man who is deriving his value in his ability to follow the cause, the mission that Allah has given us. They, oh my goodness, lost my train of thought again. Right, their failures and if their progress isn't slow, their ability to be, their ability to be patient and everything, will their failures will not be as mentally devastating to them, if that makes sense. If they have that self-confidence inside of them, right? And that self-confidence is connected to just having a goal, right? All three of those goals I mentioned, they're noble goals. Don't let, if a man who is just like, you know what, I want to work so that I can get a wife and have all the, intercourse I want. If he's doing that because he wants to get reward, or he's doing that with the proper intention, like, it's rewardable. That's a noble thing. Like, there's nothing there. It's not bad to want to fulfill sunnahs, right? And of course, the man who's raising his kids, like that's a good thing. It's noble to want to raise your children good. And of course, as has been explained, it is noble to strive to become a scholar. But if a man doesn't have his self-confidence, he's going to have more anxiety. He's going to have more stress. And this is going to be bad for his mental health. And here's where it differs. Because a man who is unable to find a wife, or hold on, let me take a step back. So I'm trying to tie this into the topic of, I've already said a bunch of words the algorithm isn't going to like, so I'll just say this. I'm trying to tie this into male suicide. Because it is my belief, and it is, like, psychiatrists and wise men and whoever else that you look up to, most of them will kind of agree that men who kill themselves often do it, most of the time they do it, because they have no sense of self-worth. They have no sense of, I guess you could say, purpose, right? Because if you're striving to get a woman and you just keep failing over and over and over, then that must mean you suck, right? And if you can't do that, if you can't even do something as seemingly as simple as get a woman, then, like, well, what is your worth? What is your purpose? Why am I here? And I think that this applies just in general to any kind of striving that the man is doing. There's striving he could do that are not these three examples. I used them because, that they're the ones I decided to use. And I think what is different, or I think a solution to helping prevent or to reduce the number of men who kill themselves is Islam, basically. Why? Well, it goes back to what I just said. The man who is striving to get a woman so that he can have all the intercourse he wants, he's trying to fulfill something, an Islamic sunnah, right? Because it's sunnah to get married, but it's also sunnah to have a lot of intercourse. Like, the more the better. And the man who knows that and is able to internalize that knows that even if he fails, he still gets reward. Like, his hereafter is still going to be, good, right? And it's the same for the other two, right? And I would say for the one who is striving to be a scholar, he knows that his reward will be enormous. Like, huge. Like, it's huge. MashaAllah who can. In Islam, we know that in the hereafter, well, first we know that there is a hereafter. Oh, we're at 31 minutes. There is a hereafter. And I think, if not the threat of punishment, which is sufficient for a lot of people, actually, if not that, then it is the potential of getting the reward and having a good hereafter that I think serves as a relief from the stress and anxiety that could come to a man who is striving for one of these goals and consistently failing. And yeah, so it serves as a relief from the stress and anxiety. And the relief from the stress and anxiety, in turn, reduces the occurrence of suicidal thoughts and the willingness to commit suicide. And I think that is important. MashaAllah. That's my thought process. I mean, I thought about this, and I've kind of thought about it in this way, because, as I said, this is something I've struggled with, right? In 2016 or so, that was like 2016, 2017, that was like my darkest hour. And I didn't, the reason I'm still here is because, the reason I'm still here is because I didn't, you don't want to add more sin onto the pile, right? But it is in the last 6 months, I guess you could say, where I really kind of truly discovered that inner self-worth, right? Because I didn't really have it before. And it's kind of weird for me because my mind says I can't, but my heart says I can. And usually, at least my assumption is that it's the reverse. But it's something I've struggled with and I'm working on. And it's something that I wanted to kind of share, even though my thoughts on it, might be kind of discombobulated. Ma sha'Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha lam yakun. Yeah. I think that any man who strives to learn the religious knowledge, one, he can't fail because it's, when you're striving to learn the religious knowledge, the payoff, if you will, is the journey, right? If you're striving to get a wife, the payoff is the wife. If you never get the wife, then it's easy to convince yourself that you failed. But when you strive towards the knowledge, and of course with kids, the payoff is having good kids. They become adults and they're good people. And if they're not, then that can be a heavy burden. But when you strive for the knowledge, a sentence learned is a sentence learned. And you can't fail to learn a sentence, right? And if you can learn one sentence, well, then you can learn two sentences or lines, right? Like, take memorization. An ayat learned is an ayat learned. You have your success right there. Not only do you have your success, you consecutively have a whole lot of little successes. And then you go out, oh, now I've learned them, let's memorize them. An ayat memorized is an ayat memorized. Right? It's a pathway to life that provides you with a mountain, like a string of little successes every day. Every day that you study, you get little successes. And there's no grand payoff in the dunya. Right? Because even when you think about it, when you do become a mujtahid, like an absolute mujtahid, well now, like, you have more work to do. Now if you want to do anything, you have to figure it out yourself. So it's not, things don't become easier. They become easier in some ways, but your life in general becomes harder. Right? If you get a woman, you get a wife, things become, well, maybe they don't become easier, but you get to have the release that you want as many times as you want. And when you have good kids, like, that's good. They'll help you. They'll protect you. They'll, when you get old, they'll make dua for you. Like, they'll do a lot for you. That gives you a fresh air, right? When you get a wife and you get your release, you get fresh air just blasting you. When you get good kids, like, that's a fresh air. Like, you get a relief. Like, whew, this weight has been lifted. You don't get that when you strive towards the Islamic knowledge, right? You get more responsibility. And now that I think about it, I can't believe I went 38 minutes and I didn't talk about responsibility. Because getting more responsibilities, mashallah, I didn't talk about responsibility. That's going to have to be another episode. That might be the next episode. Yeah, I think it's been 38 minutes. I think we'll continue this discussion. I say discussion. We'll continue this, public diary entry tomorrow, inshallah. Yeah. Ma sha'Allahu kan wa ma lam yasha lam yakun. Yeah, it's been mashallah. Anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Jeff out.